The Neolithic period also refers to the New Stone Age, and there were people who were beginning to really go past that, just eking out an existence as small bands of hunter-gatherers. And we have what one Australian archaeologist termed the Neolithic Revolution, that describes the radical period of change in which humans began cultivating plants, breeding animals for food, and forming permanent settlements. There was no single factor we can attribute to, this phenomena. There's a variety of factors. And so let's talk about that, and we will look at some of the ways we can discover this happened. First, we have the Earth entering a warming trend about 14,000 years ago at the end of the last ice age. Some scientists theorize this climate change drove the agricultural revolution. And if we look at the spread of systematic agriculture, you can see where there are evidence in certain areas. Two, other scientists suggest that there were intellectual advances in the human brain, and perhaps this changed the way that they began looking at the world and their hunter-gatherer lifestyle. And they saw the benefits of farming, keeping small gardens, tending large crop fields. And you can see here where all this purple is. This is where we have evidence of this trend. So it's all over the world, in Asia, in Europe, in North and South America, and of course in Central America and Africa. What happens? Well, hey, let's try to grow stuff so we can stay in one place. We can make it through the winter, and we don't have to keep always moving. It was a definite change, and no better evidence of that is found in some of the remnants of the Neolithic period. And one of the most interesting is definitely Otzi the Iceman. He's one of the most studied mummies in the world. We know he had bad knees, like it all lists here, lactose intolerance. He had stomach bacteria that causes ulcers, and he was tatted. So tattoos aren't new, people. He was probably a hunter, and after his discovery, they also found that he was sterile and he had been killed. His mummy shows the signs of the things that had happened to him. His body was pretty beat up, so that's why we think pretty sure he's a hunter. And his gut tells us that he ate goat, and he was crossing an area that was heavily covered in snow, and he fell into a crevasse, and then eventually a glacier covered him. When we talk then about these early humans, Homo sapiens, Otzi is an example of their struggle. And they are, while they're developing systems that are more complex, we know that it's going to take a while. The population will move significantly, though, during the Neolithic period, as far as numbers, from about 8 million to 65 million within 5,000 years. I know that sounds like a lot to you guys. Excuse me. I got something, my throat's a little scratchy. With this expansion, this Neolithic revolution and population explosion, people also became more protective of their territory, and they became more organized and more hierarchical. They began to develop systems of beliefs, and we think it's focused on supernatural deities. So these are farming communities for the most part. So sorry. In Jericho, we have a natural oasis in a desert and a formation that's called a tau, that's caused by layered building. So in other words, you build something, the early formation, and then as the debris from just human habitation begins to accumulate, they start to build up. They'll build up on one house on top of another. Early homes there were probably similar to this. They believe, the archaeologists, large settlement of circular homes. This particular one is from Ireland. I just took this to give you an idea of the shape, and then it'll eventually emerge into the square that we're kind of used to. But that's what Jericho looks like today. You can see that. It's pretty green there. It's in the desert, but it's a natural oasis. So it would have been a good spot for settlement. And the type of art they're making, well, it's not something we usually think of as art, but this settlement is sophisticated enough that we believe that this is how they are expressing art. The pre-pottery Neolithic town, we found these 62 skulls, and there were older and younger men as well as women and children, and perhaps these were plastered over and shells put into where the eyes were for family ancestor worship. That's what many people think, but they were plastered over. It's plaster there. It's a very, different approach as far as what we think art is, and certainly it even changed from the prehistoric period. But we do have eventually the emergence of a place where we really look to seeing the first exclusively transitional area from hunting to skill in plant and animal domestication emerge. It perhaps for some archaeologists, and there's always going to be somebody who disputes your find, so you can't ever say this is it. It is one of the most important transformations from nomad to settler occur right here. It is huge. We see art, painting, sculpture, and you pronounce this Chatal Hayuk. It is not the oldest site of the Neolithic era or the largest, but it's probably some of the most important, the most important spots in central Turkey. That's what we're looking at. It's right here. And it's near the town of Konya in south central Turkey. When the archaeologists discovered it, what they discovered was a layered town, just like at Jericho, and also a town that was designed for protection. About 8,000 people lived here, and when they constructed their homes, they put entryways into their structures on the roof. So if I look back here, it's hard to see, but you came inside to the house, we'll call it that, and that's what they would have, considered it their home, via an opening in the ceiling. That tells us they're trying to keep people out. The rooms inside the structures have a lot of them. They were definitely decorated, and they have a special concern for the burial of their dead. We found that. And these, what modern archaeologists call shrines, and perhaps these are shrines to not just the animals, but the people who went and hunted them. This is an amazing emergence at Chatal Hayek. The discovery there in 1964 really elucidated that there were people who were observing, things that were happening around them. And the Shrine of the Hunters, let's look at that more closely. You can see that here. We have humans painted in either ochre or hematite, so it's either red or black. And the herdsmen were painted in black, and the hunters were painted in this reddish type. We don't have many, solid depictions of shedded blood, but we do have ideas that people who were hunters were hurt hunting these very large animals. It's also interesting to know how large as I said, it aren't animals. They were hunting stags too. Some things were not as big, but they're going up against some pretty big beasts. The aurochs is not a beast to be playing with. The most famous image, though, that comes out of Çatalhöyük is this famous figure of a woman seated between two large feline images. It is an image that looks like it's been poked, scratched, broken, and we think that its function as a image to ward off bad spirits. Nearly every house excavated in Çatalhöyük was found to contain decorations on its walls and platforms. And so it's not an anomaly. The image of the female figure here, perhaps she's as I've read, a Venus figurine. And then there's also theories that she represents the idea that this was maybe a society that was led by women. We don't know. But we do know they have architectural settings, separate rooms with animal heads on them. And here we have a bucrania. And so why are they sitting in here? We don't know. Maybe this was, a room that was done for some type of ceremony. Göbekli Tepe is also another site from the Neolithic period that today has a lot of controversy linked to it. But I do want you to be aware of it because while all the information is new, it is challenging the concept that Egypt is the oldest civilization. And perhaps Göbekli Tepe is older. It's very controversial. I'm going to address perhaps it a little bit, but not in depth. I just want you to be aware of it. Much more famous is Stonehenge. And Stonehenge is recognized worldwide. It's always asked, people always ask questions. Who built it? Why'd they build it? It begins to emerge as people in Egypt were working on the first pyramids. But we know that this is probably more calendrical than a pyramid. A pyramid's a burial spot. And this is about a calendar and finding where we are in time because it marks the solstice. So we have Woodhenge and we have Stonehenge, and during the summer and winter solstice, we do believe these people made ceremonial routes between the two, and that was to reflect the journey from life to death. The people who designed Stonehenge then really thought this out. It is a massive undertaking. And when we see it start to be done is about 3100 BCE. The people who were working here, this is just fascinating, are people who came to the area from Anatolia, so from Turkey. And so they left, and there's a lot of theories as to why that happened. The breakthrough into the Black Sea, it's the Black Sea, right? I'm going to say right, by the ocean here in Turkey, changed everything, and people moved, and we think that they traveled here to Salisbury. They would have looked something like this. They've done some reconstruction of some people who they've actually unearthed. They lived in round houses with thatched roof, and they lived very simply. So why take all this time to build this enormous thing? Again, we know it's marking time, but is it to link to the ideas of ancestor worship? And AI has suggested a whole bunch of other stuff. And again, perhaps we'll look at a film about that. Any film that I show in class is on the playlist on ARH 2050. All right. I'm just adding different things all the time, so I didn't put anything here. The first discovery here at Stonehenge occurs with the discovery of what's called the Aubrey holes. That's these things right here. And people began working from there. The Aubrey holes were discovered by, the man's name was John Aubrey, and he began to document these things. And this is the first thing that's done here. They dug a ditch, and then we have the Aubrey holes. Then they add in the bluestones, which came from Wales. There's the Aubrey holes. And that's kind of what it would have looked like. And they were digging with deer antlers. And then they added in phase 2, some more holes, but these would have been filled with wood post. And this is during a time that we think Stonehenge was used for burials. At least 25 of the Aubrey holes were emptied and reused to hold cremation burials, and another 30 cremation burial pits were dug into the ditch of the henge. In phase 3, so that's what the, I forgot to tell you that the wood would have looked like in those new holes they put in. But in phase 3, they added the bluestones. The bluestones came from Wales. No, excuse me, that was phase 2. That was the later part of phase 2. And there were 80 of them. And they were very distinct, very hard to get there. A lot of, again, questions about how they got there. The bluestones were heavy, and a lot of people believed that they were floated there around the peninsula of England from Wales to Stonehenge. And then they added in the sarsen stones. Each stone here is, they're huge. The sarsens are very, very, very large. Not only do they weigh a lot, about 8 tons. Sorry about that. Excuse me, around 25 tons. But they're also capped with lintel stones, so that would have had to have been levered up there. The system they used was to slide the large stones into a hole, and then using very, very primitive pulleys, pull them up. When the sarsen stones are rolled there, because they're rolled there, they're rolled there from about 25 miles away. The bluestones came about 200 miles. I've seen 140, 200. It depends on what route you're talking about. So they came from a much greater distance. We don't know why they chose those. We do know that, let's go back, the original configuration was like this horseshoe. And then they took them out, and then they bought sarsen stones in and put more blue stones, and then added more blue stones, these are blue stones, back in. So they redesigned it a couple different times. Why? We don't know. We do know it was a very difficult job. And today at Stonehenge, it is a tremendous tribute to the people who worked hard and found this to be so important. We know that nearly all of the burials were adult males aged 25 to 40 years. They were in good health with little sign of hard labor or disease. And we think that they were probably elites. Maybe some of the first political leaders of Great Britain. Tremendous planning and organization was needed to create this. Now, I just saw a new look at the fact that as the project unfolded, the precision was declining. And some people believe that it was designed by someone very early who had definitely a plan. And after he died, or she, I'm going to say, you never know, the people didn't really have the plan. And so it became less and less precise. But today, people still come here on the midsummer solstice, and they come here for the midwinter solstice as well. So if you come for the midsummer, the sunrise is framed by the end of the horseshoe of triathlons in the interior. So that would be here. And if you come for that would be at the rise of the sun. And at winter, the point where it would touch would be exactly opposite. It would be on the other end. Since this is really calendrical, we have the longest and shortest days of the year, and no doubt there's some link to agriculture, but it also links to other things, heavenly events, and so it's a very complex place. Today, you can only go inside the stones during the solstice and the midwinter and the midsummer and the 2 equinoxes. So this is definitely winter. You can see with the clothing of people. I went there. It was summer. It was still cool, but I didn't make the solstice, unfortunately. But hey, maybe one day. But anyway, we are at the end of the lecture for the prehistoric period. Don't forget, this is the foundation for everything else. Right now, we're in the middle of a big revolution that's technologically driven. It may be the one that changes us forever. But this is the first one. And this one made it so that we survived as Homo sapiens. Have a great rest of your day if you're watching this early, or rest of your evening. And I will see you in class. Peace out.